If you're listening to this story late at night, dim the lights in your room, put on your headphones, and brace yourself. What you're about to hear is not a fantasy, but a real, haunting experience. Be sure to subscribe, share, and like so you don't miss out on the next creepy story. Story 1. The Man in My Grandparents' House. Since I was a child, I have been accustomed to visiting my grandparents in the countryside every summer. Their old wooden house is located deep in a small village, surrounded by rice fields and bumpy dirt roads. During the day, that place is always peaceful, with roosters crowing and children playing. But at night, the atmosphere has a strange feeling, as if it is deep, dense, and mysterious. The summer I was 12, my parents were busy with work, so I was sent to live with my grandparents for nearly 2 months. I was excited because I could roam freely, catch grasshoppers, and fish in the ditch. But just a few days later, I began to notice unusual things in this house. The first night, I woke up to the wind whistling through the crack in the door. In the dim moonlight, I saw a tall, thin figure standing right at the bedroom door, silently looking in. I was startled and screamed. My grandparents rushed in and turned on the light. But there was no one outside the door. They comforted me, saying I must have been dreaming. I nodded, but I didn't believe it. The second night, I heard slow footsteps in the hallway again. The sound of slippers scraping against the tile floor was very clear. I opened my eyes slightly, my heart pounding. Through the crack in the door, I saw that figure again. A thin man in a crumpled white shirt, his hair covering half his face. He just stood there, staring into my room. I mustered up the courage to turn on the night light. But when the light flickered on, the hallway was empty. The next day, I told her the story. She said nothing, just sat quietly sighing, her hands trembling as she fingered her rosary. I could clearly see a hint of worry in her eyes, but she did not explain further. As the night wore on, things got stranger. Sometimes I heard the back door creak open or a wooden chair scrape across the floor. Another time, as I lay in bed, I saw a long shadow cast on the wall, the shadow of a man in a wide-brimmed hat. But I was alone in the room. The climax was a night of heavy rain. I was awakened by a whisper right next to my ear. "Go out. Go out." My whole body was cold. When I opened my eyes, I saw him, that tall, thin man, squatting right next to my bed, his pale face so close that I could see his lifeless white eyes. I screamed. The lights came on. My grandparents ran in, but everything was gone. I was left shivering on the bed. The next morning, he pulled me out onto the porch and said in a low voice, "There is one thing my grandparents never told me. This house is not just our family's." He said that many years ago, when they first moved here, there was a single man in the village who was taciturn and unsociable. One rainy night, people found him hanging in this house, the very room that is now my bedroom. From then on, no one in the village dared to come near him until they bought it and renovated it. I shivered when I heard that. My grandparents said nothing had happened for many years. Maybe the spirit just appeared by chance when there was a new person in the house. But I knew clearly that what I saw couldn't be an illusion. His empty eyes, his cold breath next to my ear. It was too real. From that day on, I always asked to sleep with her. And until I left the countryside to return to the city, every time I closed my eyes, I could still clearly see the figure of that man, standing silently in the corner of the room, not taking his eyes off me. Many years have passed, I have grown up, and I have returned to my hometown less often. My grandparents' wooden house is now abandoned with no one living there. But there are nights when I return to the old room in my dreams, and that man is still waiting in the same place as before. Story 2. Gas station in the forest. It was a trip I will never forget. I drove alone through the countryside, on an endless road through the forest. It was almost midnight, and there were only dark trees on both sides. The headlights of the car cut through the thick fog, creating white streaks of light. I had been driving for more than 6 hours, tired and thirsty. There was less than a mark of gas in the tank, and the map on my phone didn't show any nearby stations. I was starting to get worried. All I wanted was to find a gas station that was still open. About 20 minutes later, from a distance, I saw a rusty sign peeking out from the shade of the trees. Gas 2 miles. My heart softened. I turned onto the small road leading to the place. On both sides were dense trees. The wind blew through the car window. Then the gas station appeared. An eerie sight. 2 old pumps, peeling paint, a sagging corrugated iron roof, neon lights flickering on and off. There was no sound except the chirping of insects. If it weren't for the few old cars parked in the lot, I would have thought the place was deserted. I parked my car and stepped outside. The air was cold. The glass door of the room inside was covered in dust. I pushed it gently and it creaked open, revealing a small, dark room. The room was almost bare. The shelves were bare, save for a few moldy bottles of water. What made my hair stand on end were the 4 or 5 men scattered about the room. They turned their heads to look at me at the same time without blinking. Their faces were pale, their eyes lifeless. No one moved. No one said anything. The atmosphere was so heavy that I almost suffocated. I quickly stepped back, stammering, "Sorry. I took the wrong way." No one answered. They just continued to stare at me, like living statues. I slammed the door and turned to go to the car. As I sat down, I felt my hands shaking. I started the engine and drove quickly out of the parking lot. The rear-view mirror reflected, all of them still standing in front of the window, watching in unison, until the darkness swallowed the headlights. I gasped, telling myself that if I just kept going, everything would be fine. But soon, headlights appeared from behind. A car followed, then another. They got closer. As I sped up, so did they. My heart was pounding. Then one of them overtook me and suddenly braked, blocking the road. I slammed on the brakes, the car spun around, and 2 more cars came from behind. The car doors flew open and men stepped out. They were the same blank faces from the gas station. They approached slowly, their eyes empty but murderous. I had only seconds to decide. Instinctively, I turned the wheel and headed straight for the forest path. Tree branches whipped against the windshield. I drove a few dozen meters before the engine died, without a drop of gas. I left the car and ran through the dark forest. My heart was pounding. My breathing was labored, and the crunch of dry leaves under my feet echoed throughout the forest. Behind me, I could hear the footsteps of many people chasing after me, rhythmic and unhurried, as if they were sure they would catch me. I hid behind a large tree, holding my breath. The flashlight beam swept past, brushing against my face. I almost fainted from fear. But strangely, they ignored me, continuing deeper into the forest. I didn't dare move, sitting still until dawn. When I returned, my car was still on the trail, untouched. The gas station was gone. I turned back the same way, but there was no sign, no shelter, just a vacant lot covered with weeds. I told the police, but they just shook their heads. The area, they said, had been abandoned for decades. There was no gas station in operation. So, where did I go wrong that night? And those men, who were they really? Story 3. The strange car in my yard. That night I drove home from my friend's house. The road was quite deserted, with only a few yellow street lamps casting shadows on the asphalt, soaked with night dew. The clock was just past 1 a.m. I was tired, and just wanted to get home quickly so I could have a deep sleep. As I turned into the alley leading to the house, I caught a glimpse of something unusual. In the front yard, right next to the gate, there was a strange car. It did not belong to the neighbors and had never been seen in this area before. It was a black sedan with tinted windows and headlights still on, as if it had just been turned off. I slowed down, my heart beating fast. My neighborhood was quiet and there were few strangers. Yet now, in the middle of the night, there was an unknown car parked right in the yard. I tried to reassure myself. Maybe it was a neighbor's guest. Maybe someone had come by mistake. But the feeling in my gut told me that something was wrong. I pulled over, sat in the car for a moment and observed. But the sedan was completely silent, not moving. I gathered all my courage, got out, and stealthily approached. In the dim light, I tried to see through the dark glass. I couldn't see a face, but I could swear. There was someone sitting inside. A motionless figure, back straight, face turned towards the window as if watching me. With a chill down my spine, I quickly went back into the house and locked the door tightly. My heart was still pounding. I pulled the curtains but couldn't contain my curiosity and peeked out. The car was still there. The headlights flashed ever so slightly, as if someone had just touched a switch. I decided to call the police. The officer on duty said they would send a patrol car over and told me to stay inside. I nodded vigorously, my hands shaking as I held the phone. 15 minutes seemed like an hour. Finally, the red and blue lights of a police car appeared at the end of the street. I breathed a sigh of relief. But just as the police car reached the gate, the sedan started up and sped away like a ghost, disappearing into the night. 2 policemen got out of the car and asked me for details. I told them everything: the car, the shadow, the feeling of being followed. They nodded and took notes. Then one of them said, "We have had similar reports. Many times people have seen a black sedan appear in front of their house in the middle of the night. When the police arrive, it is gone." I was stunned, unable to believe my ears. I asked, "Who was it anyway? A stalker or just a prank?" The policeman shook his head. "No one knows yet. But the strange thing is, every time that car appears a few days later, a person goes missing in the area." My blood ran cold. They reassured me, told me to report if I saw anything else, and then left. I lay awake that night, not daring to sleep. It wasn't until the morning light shone through the curtains that I finally fell asleep. When I woke up, there was no trace of the car in the yard, as if it had never existed. But from that day on, every time I stepped out of the door at night, I felt like I was being followed. Sometimes in the rearview mirror, I would catch a glimpse of headlights from afar, always following me. And only when I turned around, the road was completely empty. Tonight, as I write these lines, a sound makes me pause. Outside, there is the soft, steady sound of an engine. I gently pull the curtain, and my heart drops. The black sedan stopped right in front of the gate. Its headlights were shining brightly, shining straight into my window. Story 4. A knock at 3 a.m. I live alone in a small apartment on the 10th floor of an old building. During the day, the place is always bustling, children running in the hallways, adults chatting. But at night, the whole area becomes a different world, so quiet that I can hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. I usually work late, sometimes until 2 or 3 in the morning before I leave my computer screen. That night was no different. I turned off the computer, pulled up a chair, and plopped down on the bed. My eyes were half closed when a soft knock came from the main door. I sat up, straining my ears. Maybe I had misheard. But a few seconds later, another sound. Stump again, this time more clearly. I tiptoed into the living room and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, save for a pale yellow light that cast a shadow across the tiled floor. Not a soul in sight. I sighed, telling myself it must be an illusion caused by fatigue. But when I turned my back, knock, 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 3 knocks in a row, louder, more urgent. I turned around, my heart pounding. I looked through the peephole again, still no one. This time I started to feel really scared. I pulled the chair close to the door as if to create a small barrier. Then, as soon as I returned to my room, the phone on the table suddenly lit up. A text message had just arrived. The sender was a strange string of characters not saved in my contacts. The message was only 2 words long. Open. I almost dropped the phone. How did they know I was hesitating at the door? My hands were shaking as I turned on all the lights in the house and pulled the curtain shut. But before he could regain his composure, the knocking came again, not from the front door anymore, but from the window. I froze. My apartment was on the 10th floor, with no balcony or place to stand outside. And yet someone, or something, was tapping slowly on the glass. I gathered my courage, walked over, and quickly pulled the curtains open. There was no one, just darkness and the distant lights of the city. I thought I was going crazy. I called the front desk for help. They checked the hallway cameras but reported that no one had passed by my apartment all night. The front door, they said, was still quiet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor, my eyes glued to the window. Occasionally, I could still hear sounds. Knock, knock. Rang, as if someone was tapping very lightly, enough to make me not dare close my eyes. When morning came, everything was gone. The strange messages on the phone were gone too, without a trace. No call logs, no contacts, as if they had never existed. I told myself it was just a nightmare. But from that day on, I began to live in fear. Every night I put furniture and chairs to block the door, closed the curtains and left the lights on. Sometimes at the spooky hours, I hear that knock, soft, patient, steady, as if someone is out there, waiting for me to let my guard down. And what made me shiver the most was one time recently, while I was sitting at work, the computer screen suddenly turned off. Reflected on the dark glass, I clearly saw, right behind me, a figure standing close to the window. I turned around, but of course there was nothing. Tonight the clock is exactly 3 a.m. I write these lines with a choking fear. The space is so quiet that I can hear every heartbeat. And then knock. The first knock sounded again. Chapter 5. Online Friends. When I was a student, I was quite introverted. Outside of class, I mostly just hung around my dorm room with my old laptop. To kill time, I often went to forums and chat rooms to find people to talk to. One day, I was added as a friend by the name of Shadow13. At first, he just sent me a casual greeting, but gradually we started talking more. He seemed to understand me, always appearing when I was bored or tired. I started to consider him as a close friend, even though I had never seen him. What I found strange was that Shadow13 hardly ever talked about himself. Whenever I asked him, he would just give me a short answer. I'm nearby, we'll meet soon. I thought he just wanted to keep his personal life private, so I didn't pay much attention. One late evening we were chatting as usual. I joked, "If you really live nearby, why don't you come over to my room?" Immediately he replied, "I'm right outside the door." I shivered and quickly typed back, "Don't joke like that, it's midnight." But he sent a photo. I was stunned. It was the door to my rented room with a blurry number plate. At the same time, I heard knock, knock. A soft knock came from the real door. With trembling hands, I turned on the camera through the peephole. The hallway was dark and empty. I turned back to the screen. The account Shadow13 had continued to message. "Don't look through the magic eye. I'm standing off to the side out of sight." I broke out in a cold sweat, quickly blocked the account and turned off the computer. But as soon as I lay down on the bed, my phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number. "Why did you block me? I just want to be friends." I panicked, took out the battery of my phone and pulled the blanket over me. I couldn't sleep all night. The sound of footsteps in the hallway kept ringing in my ears. In the days that followed, I tried to forget about it, to stay off the internet, but it didn't stop. I started receiving strange packages in my dorm room. No sender's name, just my exact address. Inside were creepy familiar items. The pen I dropped in the library, the scarf I left in class, even a photo of me sleeping on my desk. I almost went crazy. I changed my phone number, my internet account, even asked to move to another room. But no matter where I went, the strange packages kept coming. One night I decided to ask my best friend to stay with me for a few days to lessen my fear. But just as we were talking in the room, there was a familiar knock on the door. My friend thought it was just someone in the wrong room, so he took a chance and opened the door. The hallway was completely silent. Only a small box sat on the doorstep. We opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a photo of the two of us, sitting in the room, looking towards the door. My friend turned pale, packed up and left that night, leaving me alone. I didn't dare tell anyone else about this, but Shadow 13 never disappeared. Every now and then, among my work emails, an anonymous message would slip in. I'm always here. We'll always be friends. Tonight, as I write these lines, the computer screen suddenly went black. In the reflection on the glass, I saw behind me a tall, thin figure standing silently, leaning close to my back. If you find these stories scary, please share this video to warn others, like to show your support, and subscribe to the channel for more terrifying stories. Be careful when you are alone, because sometimes you are not really alone.